She stepped into the barn, flashlight beam cutting through dust. Nothing moved. Just silence, hay, and shadows. She was about to turn back when it came, so faint she thought it was the wind. "I'm inside." The whisper froze her blood. The hinges groaned as the barn door gave way under her push. The storm outside faded the moment she stepped in, replaced by the muted hush of dust and silence. Her flashlight beam cut across wooden beams, old hay scattered in the loft, rusted tools hung crooked along the wall. Nothing stirred. She exhaled slowly, boots crunching over straw that had long since dried into brittle threads. Her heart thudded against her ribs, not from what she saw, but from what she didn't. She had been told a child had run this way, barefoot, panicked. Neighbors swore they'd seen him vanish into the night, headed toward this property. But now, standing inside, it looked abandoned. Empty. She swept the flashlight again. The loft overhead sagged under its own weight. A broken ladder leaned against the wall. Dust motes danced in the beam like insects trapped in amber. The smell was dry, wood and hay mixed with something older, a dampness soaked into the beams. Her radio crackled faintly at her belt. "Search Team Bravo, do you have eyes on him?" She hesitated before clicking her mic negative. "Barn's clear so far." The words tasted wrong even as she said them. She stepped further inside, passing under the heavy crossbeam at the barn's center. Her flashlight swept the corners, nothing but discarded feed sacks, rusted metal, a tarp covering something unimportant. No movement. No sound. Her breath slowed. Maybe the witnesses were wrong. Maybe the boy hadn't come here at all. Maybe she'd wasted precious minutes on an empty structure while he was out there. And then she heard it. A whisper. So faint she thought it was the barn groaning. Or the wind slipping through the gaps in the wood. But no, the syllables were too sharp. Too human. "I'm inside." Her blood froze. The words weren't shouted. They weren't even spoken. They were breathed, thin as thread, trembling against the silence. She whipped her flashlight toward the loft. Nothing moved. The hay sat undisturbed, cobwebs swaying slightly in the draft. She swung the beam to the far corner. Tools hung still. No child. No shadow. Her throat went dry. She clicked her mic again, but her finger hovered over the transmit button. What could she say? That she'd heard a whisper no one else might believe? She released it without speaking. "I'm inside." The second time it was clearer. Same voice, fragile, frightened. A child's. She swallowed, shifting her weight. "Where?" she asked, her own whisper slipping into the dust. Silence. Her flashlight beam trembled against the boards as her hand shook. She steadied it against her wrist, forcing control back into her body. Her boots creaked as she stepped toward the loft ladder. The ladder groaned when she tested it with her weight. Half the rungs looked ready to give. She climbed anyway, slow, deliberate. The flashlight beam swept the loft, empty. Just hay scattered, mice droppings, broken boards letting in slivers of moonlight. She crouched low, scanning. Her breath fogged faintly in the chill air. "Talk to me," she whispered. Nothing. Then, closer, right by her ear, as if spoken through the wood itself, "Don't let him find me." Her chest clenched. She spun, beam slicing across emptiness. No child stood there. No one crouched in the shadows. Just hay, wood, silence. Her radio cracked again. "Bravo, status check." She pressed her mic, voice steadier than she felt. "Still searching." "Stand by." Her light swept lower now, to the floor beneath the loft. She leaned over the edge, beam angling down between boards. Something shifted below, just a shadow, barely noticeable. Her pulse quickened. The whisper had not come from the loft. It had come from under it. She slid back down the ladder, boots thudding against earth. Her beam crawled along the base of the loft, across wooden slats stacked into a half-wall foundation. At first it was seamless, all wood and age. But then she saw it, a gap. A faint seam, no wider than her wrist, hidden behind a pile of rotted feed sacks. She kicked the sacks aside, sending dust into the air. Her light found the seam again, tracing its shape. A door. Low, narrow, disguised to look like part of the barn wall. She crouched, pressing her ear to the wood. Her heart thumped so hard she thought it might drown the sound out. For a moment there was nothing. Then, right against her ear, "I'm inside." She kept her ear on the wood a moment longer, counting the beats of her heart until they steadied. The panel was old but not original to the barn, she could feel that now. The grain ran a different direction, the surface planed smoother than the surrounding slats. Someone had fitted this to vanish in plain sight. Her gloved fingers traced the seam. No handle. No obvious latch. She set the flashlight on its tail so the beam climbed the wall and freed both hands. From her vest she pulled a thin pry tool and slipped the flat end into the gap. The wood resisted. She worked it gently, careful not to splinter the slat and send shards inward. "Can you hear me?" she said, keeping her voice low, even. "Knock once." Silence. Then, faint, one tap, hollow and close to her ear. "Good," she breathed. "I'm going to open this. Stay back from the door if you can." Her radio crackled. "Bravo, we're shifting resources to the north orchard. You still in the barn?" She considered lying, saying she was clear and on her way. But the whisper had been too clean, too real to ignore. She clicked. "Affirm. I have a confined space behind a false panel. Possible juvenile. I need one more to my location and a med kit staged at the threshold. Approach quiet. Copy. One inbound." She slid the pry tool a little deeper, feeling for give. The panel flexed a fraction with a dry creak. Something inside moved, fabric against wood, or a knee brushing a board. She paused. "Back up a little more if you can," she said gently. "What's your name?" A swallow, amplified by the narrow cavity. Then, a whisper so soft she had to lean in to catch it. "Noah." "Okay, Noah. I'm Morgan." The name left her mouth before she thought about choosing it. She used the one she used on searches, the one that sounded like a person, not a uniform. "Is anyone in there with you?" A thin breath. "No." "Okay. I'm going to open the door now. It might be loud. Cover your face." She eased more pressure into the pry. The old nails protested with a metallic tick. The board lifted a hair's breadth, and cool air spindle threaded past her cheek, dusty and stale. She stopped and lowered her ear again. The air inside didn't smell like rot. Dry, yes. Old hay, yes. But not the sweet, dangerous edge of gas. Still, she pulled a folded particulate mask from her pocket and tugged it up under her chin, ready. Her flashlight washed the seams as she shifted position, bracing a knee. "You good, Noah?" A breath. "Cold. We'll fix that." She levered once, twice. A nail squealed. The panel popped forward an inch, enough to hook fingertips around the raw edge. She set the pry aside and pulled carefully, keeping her body out of the door's swing. The board gave, then caught on something. A slide bolt inside, maybe, or a warped lip. "Noah, see if there's a latch near the bottom." A little metal piece that slides? Silence. A scrape. Then a small clink. "Got it," she said. "Slide it toward the wall." A pause. "It's stuck. Use your palm. Heel of your hand." Short push. A grunt, the sound of a small body trying to be bigger. The clink again, then a thin, satisfying shift of metal. There you go. She pulled. The panel swung inward 6 inches, grinding on the packed earth floor. Cold air spilled from the cavity, and her beam cut into a narrow void barely 3 feet deep, floor to ceiling, between the barn's outer wall and a secondary partition. A crawl space, built with purpose, screened by slats. He was smaller than she'd braced for. 9, maybe 10. Knees pulled to his chest, sweatshirt soaked at the cuffs where he'd clutched them. Dirt smeared his cheek in a perfect handprint, his own, she realized, from pressing into the corner. She kept the beam high so it wouldn't blind him and crouched to his level. Hey, Noah. He didn't move toward her. His eyes darted past her shoulder into the barn, then back to the dark line of the seam around him, as if afraid the wood would knit itself shut again. You hurt anywhere? She asked. He shook his head. Then, after a second, a small shrug. Arm. Left or right? He lifted his left elbow an inch. Enough. Okay. We'll check it. She used the tone that smooth edges off a long night. I've got a blanket just outside. We'll warm you up. He wet his lips. Maybe it was the dust, maybe the minutes he'd spent not breathing enough. Is he here? He whispered. Who? He swallowed and looked at the floor, bro working. Don't let him find me. Morgan let the words sit a heartbeat. She didn't fill them, didn't press. She nodded as if they were a task she could file and complete. He won't, she said, and made sure her voice carried the weight of a promise. Footsteps padded softly across the threshold. Bravo 2, a voice whispered. Claire, lean and quiet, held up a med pouch and a thermal blanket, headlamp shielded with her palm. Her gaze flicked from Morgan to the open panel, taking in the shape of the space, the boy's posture, the tension threaded through both. Hey, Noah, Claire murmured. Mind if I hand Morgan a blanket to put on your shoulders? Noah's eyes tracked the blanket like it might turn into something else midair. He nodded once. Morgan slid the silver-lined sheet inside, draping it so it wrapped his back without snagging on nails. The space tightened with the added bulk, and Noah flinched at the change. She held still until his shoulders eased. Can you scoot toward me? She asked. Just a little. He didn't move. Okay, she said softly. We'll make more room. She set the flashlight on its tail again, angling it so the beam filled the void without glaring in his face, and looked along the jamb. The hinges were crude, just strap iron and bent nails. The door would lift free if she took its weight and edged it up. Claire, she whispered. I'm going to lift. Ease the bottom out when I have it. They counted under their breath. On 3, Morgan set both hands under the inside edge and lifted, feeling the gritty drag of iron against wood. The door rose half an inch. Claire slid her fingers under, guiding the bottom past the packed lip. Almost, Claire said. Noah made a small sound, not fear this time, just the animal relief of seeing the space widen. Morgan braced her knee, lifted again, and the door cleared, swinging another 6 inches. Enough for Noah to turn his body. He moved awkwardly, cradling his left arm. When his sneaker met the barn floor, he froze, eyes on the open space beyond as if it were a trap. The flashlight painted his face in bands of shadow. Morgan resisted the urge to reach for him. She let him choose. He stepped out. The cold of the barn hit him and he shivered so hard his teeth clicked. Claire draped the blanket tighter and eased a hand under his elbow, careful of the sore arm. Good, Morgan said, to him and to the barn. You did great. Noah's gaze flicked again to the open door in the wall, then to the larger barn door that gaped to the storm. His breath hitched. He comes when it's loud, he whispered. Who does? Claire asked, before she could stop herself. Noah's eyes cut to Morgan as if the answer belonged to her. She held the boy's gaze a second and shook her head, almost imperceptibly. Not yet. Not here. Let's get you to the truck, she said. Warm, lights on, hot air. We'll check that arm. Noah nodded, tiny and fast. He took a step, then stopped, head tilting as if he were listening to the boards themselves. Morgan felt it too, an almost inaudible vibration in the floor, not the storm, something nearer, a weight settling, or feet on a distant plank. Claire's eyes lifted, meeting Morgan's over the boy's head. She'd felt it too. Lights down, Morgan said quietly. They dropped their headlamps to the floor so only the lowest spill lit their boots. The barn reassembled into shadow and shape. The door to the void hung open, a thin black mouth. The main door to the yard waited across a stretch of straw and tools and dark. Morgan clicked her radio once, no voice, just the agreed signal to the unit outside to hold position and stay quiet. She shifted so she stood between Noah and the open barn, her body a simple line he could follow if everything else went black. We're walking slow, she said. Quiet feet. Watch your step. He nodded again, eyes huge. He clutched the blanket with his right hand, left arm tucked close. They moved. 3 bodies, 1 breath. The barn returned each sound back to them magnified, a scuff, a straw crunch, the whisper of fabric. Halfway to the door, Noah stopped and turned his head toward the loft, listening with his whole body. Morgan didn't ask what he heard. She heard enough, the tiniest shift of weight on old wood, the smallest exhale from the wrong part of the dark. Keep with me, she said, so softly it was almost only the shape of a word. Noah's whisper answered like a thread pulled through cloth. I'm inside. Not anymore, she said. They reached the threshold. Morgan put her hand against the barn door, felt the cool of rain bleeding through it, and eased it wider. Night pressed close, wet and waiting. Somewhere across the yard a hinge ticked, as if another door remembered being moved. Claire's hand tightened on the med pouch. Noah's knuckles were white on the blanket seam. They stepped into the night. The rain hit harder once they crossed the threshold, a cold sheet that plastered Noah's hair to his forehead and soaked the thermal blanket within seconds. He shrank into it anyway, clinging to its edges as if it could shield him from more than the weather. Morgan scanned the yard. The farmhouse loomed dark 50 yards off, windows like blind eyes. To the right, a line of poplars bent in the wind, their tops thrashing against the sky. Between, the yard stretched wide, knee-high grass flattened by rain. No lights. No movement. Trucks down the lane, Claire said, voice pitched low. She angled her headlamp to the mud, a faint glow marking their path. Morgan gave a single nod. Stay tight. They moved, boots sinking into wet earth. Noah kept pace but close, pressing against Morgan's side with each step. His eyes flicked to the farmhouse, then back to the barn they'd left open behind them. Morgan's instinct was to radio in, confirm extraction path, request cover lights. But something in the boy's grip stopped her. His small hand clenched the fabric of her sleeve as if light itself might draw attention. She left the radio silent. The yard seemed too large, too exposed. Every gust of wind brought new noises, tin rattling from the shed, the low groan of the farmhouse eaves. Normal sounds, she told herself. But Noah stiffened at each one, as if he knew the difference between storm and something else. Halfway across, he stopped. His breath hitched. What is it? Morgan whispered, crouching to meet his eyes. He lifted a trembling finger. Not to the barn. Not to the trees. To the farmhouse. Morgan followed his point. Nothing. Just shuttered windows, paint peeling, gutters spilling rainwater. She waited. Then, there. A faint vibration more felt than heard. A hollow knock, irregular, as if something shifted against a wall inside. Claire tensed. Wind? Too heavy, Morgan muttered. She shifted so Noah was shielded behind her. We keep moving. They pushed forward, the truck's dim hazard lights blinking faint red at the end of the lane. Safe ground felt close enough to taste. Then Noah whispered, so soft the storm almost stole it. He comes when the doors move. Morgan's gut tightened. She glanced back. The barn door they had left half open now swung wide under the wind. It slammed against its frame with a crack, then drifted back. Slammed again. Each impact echoed across the yard like a signal. The dog team should have been here, she thought. But this call had been classified as routine search, not high risk. They hadn't expected, whatever this was. Claire, she said under her breath, get them in the truck. Claire nodded, tightening her arm around Noah's shoulders. She pushed him forward faster, the blanket dragging in the mud. Morgan brought up the rear, hand on her sidearm though protocol said rescue first, weapons last. Her eyes scanned the yard, the farmhouse, the black shapes of trees. Nothing moved. But her chest told her otherwise. Another slam from the barn door. Louder. Longer. Noah whimpered. He knows now. Claire urged him on, voice steady despite the tension. Almost there. See the lights? Keep walking, Noah. They reached the gravel lane. The truck squatted at the far end, headlights off, only hazard lights pulsing faintly. A driver sat inside, face pale through the glass, watching them hurry closer. Morgan allowed a threat of relief. They had him. He was out. One more sprint and the storm would be behind glass and steel. Then Noah froze again. This time he didn't point. He only whispered, barely audible over rain. I hear him. Morgan stopped beside him, body angled outward, flashlight ready. Where? Noah's eyes darted back to the farmhouse. A window on the second floor glimmered faintly, like glass catching lightning, but no lightning flashed. Just steady reflection, as if something inside had shifted. Claire hissed, move, and half-dragged Noah the last 20 yards. The boy stumbled but ran, driven by her pull. Morgan backed toward the truck, scanning. The barn door slammed once more behind her, then, suddenly, stopped. The silence after was worse than the noise. They reached the truck. Claire yanked the rear door open, shoved Noah inside, then climbed in after him. The driver twisted in his seat, relief breaking across his face. Morgan slammed the door behind them and stayed outside a second longer, eyes locked on the farmhouse. The window was dark now. The barn door stood still. The yard seemed to hold its breath. She climbed into the passenger seat, rain dripping from her gear. Drive, she ordered. The engine coughed, then roared to life. Tires spit gravel as they pulled down the lane. The farmhouse and barn shrank behind them, swallowed by storm and shadow. Inside, Noah sat curled against Claire, shivering under the blanket. His lips moved, whispering to himself, repeating the same phrase over and over like a prayer. I'm inside. I'm inside. I'm inside. Morgan turned in her seat, watching him. Noah. You're not inside anymore. You're safe. But his eyes stayed fixed on the rain-streaked window, voice trembling with each repetition. I'm inside. Morgan's hand tightened on her knee. Because the way he said it, it didn't sound like a memory. It sounded like a warning. The truck's wipers fought against the rain, squealing across glass, barely cutting through the sheets that blurred the lane ahead. Gravel turned to mud under the tires. Each turn of the wheel sent the back end skidding slightly before the driver corrected. Inside the cab, heat blasted weakly from the vents, fogging the glass at the edges. Claire rubbed at the windshield with her sleeve, muttering under her breath. Morgan sat rigid in the passenger seat, radio silent in her lap, eyes scanning the mirrors. Noah was curled against Claire in the back seat, the thermal blanket drawn tight. His lips still moved, the same words whispered again and again. "I'm inside. I'm inside. I'm inside." Morgan turned, watching him through the headrest. "Noah," she said gently, raising her voice just enough to cut through the engine. "Look at me." He didn't. His eyes stayed fixed on the rain sliding across the window, tracking each rivulet like he was counting them. His whisper didn't stop. Claire tried, shifting closer. "You're in the truck now, sweetheart. You're safe. We're taking you away from the barn." For the first time, he broke rhythm. His whisper stopped. He blinked and looked at her, voice hoarse. "It's not the barn." Claire's hand froze on his shoulder. "What do you mean?" He turned his face toward the window again, cheek pressed against the glass. His breath fogged a circle on it. Quietly, almost lost in the hum of the engine, he said, "He follows." Morgan's jaw tightened. She clicked her radio, low. "Bravo to base, en route with juvenile. Advise ETA 10. Any movement near farmhouse?" Static hissed. Then, "Negative, Bravo. Area clear. Storms masking most signals. Keep line open." Morgan replaced the mic but didn't relax. She glanced at the side mirror again. Darkness, rain, streaks of their own taillights bouncing off wet gravel. Nothing else. The driver cleared his throat. "We'll hit the main road in 3 minutes. After that it's smooth." But the words barely left his mouth when the truck jolted. Tires slammed into a rut deeper than it should have been. The chassis shuddered, throwing Claire sideways. Noah cried out, clutching his arm. "Easy," Morgan snapped. "Slow it." The driver fought the wheel. Roads washing out, wasn't like this an hour ago. The truck crawled forward, tires throwing mud in arcs. The engine strained. Finally, they pulled free, the lane leveling again. In the back, Claire adjusted Noah's blanket, soothing. "Almost there. Just a little longer." But Noah wasn't listening. His eyes were wide, fixed on the back window. His lips moved again, barely sound this time. "I'm inside." Morgan turned sharply. "What do you see, Noah?" His finger lifted, trembling, pointing at the fogged rear glass. Rain streaks glistened red in the reflection of their hazards. Nothing more. But then, just faintly, something shifted in the blur. A shadow that didn't belong. Not a tree. Not debris. Taller. Moving. Morgan's throat tightened. She gripped the seat, leaning for a clearer view, but the wipers couldn't touch the back window. The blur smeared, hiding detail. The truck rounded a bend. The reflection vanished. Claire frowned at Noah. "There's nothing there, honey." Noah shook his head fiercely. "He's inside." Morgan turned back toward him, voice sharp. "Inside what?" His eyes slid to hers, wide and shining. His lips parted, whisper breaking into 2 words this time. "Inside me." The cab went silent. The only sounds were rain hammering the roof and the wipers squealing. Even the engine seemed quieter. Claire's hand slowly fell from Noah's shoulder. The driver muttered something under his breath, eyes locked on the road. Morgan forced her voice steady. "Noah. Look at me." He did, finally. His gaze was too still for a boy his age. His whisper was gone. He spoke now, barely louder, but clear. "He waits. When you opened the door, he found another way." Her stomach turned. She thought back to the barn, the hidden panel, the whisper through wood, the way the floor had vibrated like something shifting above them. The boy sagged then, exhaustion overtaking him. His eyes fluttered shut, head dropping against Claire's arm. Claire glanced up, alarmed. Is he? Sleeping, Morgan said, though the word felt like a lie. They rode in silence the rest of the way to the main road. The truck climbed out of the washed lane, tires biting asphalt. The ride smoothed, the storm no less heavy but less wild. The driver exhaled in relief, muttering, "Made it." Morgan checked the mirror again. Darkness swallowed the lane behind them. No barn, no farmhouse, no figure in the rain. But Noah's last words coiled in her chest, heavier than the storm itself. "Inside me." The highway stretched ahead, black and slick, reflecting their headlights like a sheet of oil. The wipers beat in steady rhythm now, calmer than the gravel lane had been, but no one in the cab felt relief. The storm pressed close, hemming them in, every mile crawling like they hadn't moved at all. Morgan sat rigid, boots braced against the floorboard. Her eyes didn't leave the windshield, though her mind replayed the last whisper in the barn, and the one in the truck, "Inside me." She turned once, watching Noah. He was slumped against Claire, head tilted, eyes closed. The blanket swallowed him whole, only a pale cheek visible in the dim dashboard glow. Claire's arm was around him, steady, protective, but her own face was pale. She mouthed something silently at Morgan. What did he mean? Morgan shook her head once. She didn't know. The driver cleared his throat, voice too loud in the hush. "Storm will break in 20. Base is 7 miles out. We're good." But as he spoke, the radio crackled, static harsh, drowning his words. A burst of sound, like someone whispering into the channel, made Claire flinch. Morgan snatched the mic bravo to base. "Say again." Static. Then, faint, through the hiss, "I'm inside." Her blood froze. She yanked the mic away from her mouth, stared at it like it had betrayed her. That wasn't command. Claire's hand tightened on Noah's shoulder. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. His lips shaped the word before sound came, "Soon." Morgan twisted back. "Noah, listen to me. Who's inside you?" The boy blinked, as if confused by the question. His voice was hoarse, almost a breath. "He moves when the doors move." Claire whispered sharply, "What doors?" "The barn?" Noah's head shook faintly. "Any door." The driver laughed nervously, glancing in the rear view. "Kid's just spooked. Barn like that, hell, I'd be talking nonsense too." But his words didn't erase the sweat on his temple. The road unspooled ahead. Mile markers slid past. The rain softened for a beat, then picked up again, wind pushing sheets sideways across the glass. Morgan's eyes caught something in the mirror. A shape. Brief, too quick, gone before she could name it. Tall. Following. Her stomach dropped. She turned in her seat, peering through the back glass. The red glow of their hazards cast the road in pulses. Nothing. Empty highway. But Noah's breathing quickened. He pressed his face into Claire's sleeve, whispering again. "Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop." Morgan faced forward again, voice low, steady. "Driver, don't slow down. Not for anything." His knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Copy." They drove. 10 minutes felt like an hour. The storm thickened again, lightning splitting the horizon, thunder rolling low. The boy muttered under each rumble, like answering it. Claire met Morgan's eyes over his head. What happens if he's right? If someone is following? Morgan didn't answer immediately. She thought of the barn, the floor vibrating. Of the farmhouse window glimmering with no lightning behind it. Of the radio carrying a voice no one had keyed. Finally she said, "Then we keep moving until daylight." The words weren't protocol. They were survival. The radio hissed again. A voice bled through, not command, not familiar. Just a whisper. Open the door. The cab went silent. Even the storm seemed to pause. The driver cursed under his breath. What the hell was that? Morgan gripped the mic, thumb trembling. She didn't key it. She didn't dare. Noah lifted his head. His eyes were glassy, wide, reflecting the dash lights. Don't answer. He's waiting. Morgan swallowed hard. Her throat felt raw. She asked him softly, waiting for what? Noah's answer was a single word, flat and final. Choose. Morgan froze. The word echoed like a bell. It was the same word that had ended too many nights in the field, the choice to press forward, to fall back, to risk one for many. But never like this. She stared at the boy. Choose what? He didn't answer. His head lolled again, whisper dropping back into rhythm. I'm inside. I'm inside. The truck's headlights cut a wide curve in the road. The hazard lights blinked steady red in the rain. And in the reflection of the glass, just for a second, Morgan saw another face, pressed against the outside of the window. Watching. She blinked. It was gone. The truck's tires hummed smoother once the road widened. The storm still lashed the glass, but the lane markers glowed steady now, a corridor of white guiding them through black. Ahead, faint lights shimmered against the rain, the outpost, the supposed safe ground. Morgan let out a slow breath, though her hand never left the butt of her sidearm. Half a mile, she muttered. Claire gave a faint nod, pulling the blanket higher over Noah. The boy's head rested against her chest, eyes half shut, lips moving. His whisper had shifted, not the steady I'm inside anymore. Now, it was fragmented. Words breaking, reforming. He waits, doors, soon. Claire stroked his damp hair, her voice soft. Almost there, Noah. Almost done. The driver adjusted his grip on the wheel, shoulders loosening as the base lights grew brighter. Told you, we're clear. Just storm jitters. Morgan didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the mirrors, scanning the wash of headlights behind them. Empty. No tail, no shape. But her gut didn't ease. The radio cracked again, soft. Not static. Not command. Just a voice, calm this time. Almost there. The driver flinched, swearing. Claire's eyes snapped up. Morgan gripped the mic but didn't press transmit. Her throat was dry. Noah stirred, whispering louder now, voice straining. Don't let him in. Don't let him in. Claire tightened her arm. Shoo, you're okay. But Noah twisted, fighting against the blanket. His eyes open wide, fever bright, fixed on the windshield. Morgan followed his gaze, and saw it. At first it was a trick of rain. A shimmer, a shadow between the beams of the headlights. But then it sharpened. A tall silhouette, standing dead center in the road. The driver slammed the brakes. Tires screamed, the truck fishtailing. Everyone lurched forward, Noah crying out. The truck skidded sideways, stopped just short of the figure. Headlights cut across the road. Empty. Nothing stood there. Just rain falling on asphalt. The driver panted, gripping the wheel. Jesus, did you see? Morgan cut him off, voice sharp. Drive. Don't stop again. He swallowed and pressed the pedal. The truck rolled forward, slower now. In the back, Noah shook, whispering faster. He waits at the doors. He waits at the doors. Claire held him, but her own eyes were wide. She whispered toward Morgan, what if he's right? What if stopping opened? The truck jolted again. The rear door lock clicked. Once. Loud in the cab. Everyone froze. Claire whipped her head around. The lock on her side had lifted up on its own. No, Morgan hissed. She reached back, slammed it down. Her knuckles whitened on the lever. Keep it shut. The driver muttered, it's electrical, Storm. But his voice broke off. Because the opposite lock clicked up too. The cab filled with Noah's whisper, urgent now, broken into a cry. Don't let him in. Don't let him in. Morgan reached across both doors, forcing the locks down. She held them with both fists, arms trembling. Keep driving. The base gates were in sight now, bright through the storm, guards dim shapes under ponchos. The truck barreled forward, tires spitting water. But the locks rattled under her grip. Once. Twice. Harder. Like hands on the other side, testing. Noah screamed suddenly, words cutting through the storm like a knife. He's already here. The lights of the base filled the windshield. Guards waved them in. Floodlights cut the rain, blinding. The truck skidded through the gate, braked hard under the canopy. Soldiers rushed forward, yanking the doors open. Morgan spun. Noah was rigid in Claire's arms, eyes wide, lips moving soundlessly now. His chest heaved. His gaze fixed not on the guards, not on the light, but on the dark space between them all. The radio crackled one last time, calm and steady. I'm inside. Floodlights hammered the rain into silver needles as soldiers pulled the truck under the canopy. The driver slumped forward on the wheel, chest heaving, relief and shock mixing in his breath. Morgan shoved her door open, boots splashing into standing water. She scanned fast, the yard inside the wire, the guard shack glowing faintly, floodlight towers braced in steel. The base looked solid, familiar. But her chest didn't loosen. Claire climbed out the other side, blanket tight around Noah. He clung to her, trembling, his face buried against her collar. The guards leaned in, shouting questions over the storm, their voices sharp and efficient. Status, one barked. Juvenile recovered, requires med check, Morgan said, voice level. Her throat burned from holding too much back. They hustled Claire and Noah toward the infirmary entrance, double steel doors glowing under the canopy lights. Morgan fell in behind, scanning the shadows between trucks, the seams where light didn't reach. Each one felt like a mouth that could open wider if she blinked. The doors banged open as they entered. Warmth wrapped them instantly, too sudden after the cold storm. Fluorescence buzzed overhead, reflecting off tile that gleamed damp from boots. Claire dropped onto a bench, pulling Noah onto her lap. A medic crouched fast, gloves snapping, stethoscope pressed to the boy's chest. His voice carried calm efficiency. Pulse high, respiration irregular. Possible exposure hypothermia. Arm looks dislocated. Noah's eyes stayed open, unblinking, fixed on the ceiling. His lips moved faintly, soundless now. Morgan leaned down close. Noah, can you hear me? His lips stopped. Slowly, his head turned toward her. His voice cracked out, hoarse. He's here. Morgan stiffened. Who's here? The boy's gaze shifted past her, to the steel doors they'd just entered. They rattled. Once. Twice. Everyone in the corridor froze. The medic straightened, frown etched across his face. Wind, he muttered. But there was no wind here. Not in the sealed hall. Claire's grip on Noah tightened. Morgan. The doors rattled harder, their crash echoing down tile. Guards swore, bracing rifles. The latch groaned as though weight pressed from outside. Morgan stepped forward, drawing her sidearm, stance solid. Back from the doors, she ordered. The medic shuffled behind her, dragging Claire and Noah closer to the wall. The latch clicked again. Not forced. Not broken. Just released. One door eased inward an inch, rain misting in. The guards lunged, slamming it shut, bolting it. Their boots squealed against tile as they braced. Morgan's radio burst alive. No static this time. Just a whisper, calm, steady, too close. Almost there. Noah screamed. Not words. Just raw, piercing sound that ripped out of him like something tearing. He writhed in Claire's grip, thrashing against the blanket. His eyes rolled white. The medic fumbled for a sedative, hands shaking. We have to stabilize him. No. Morgan barked. Her gut told her sedation wasn't safety, it was opening another door. The boy gasped, head snapping forward. His voice carried sharp and high, not whisper, not fragile. Don't let him touch me. The steel doors shuddered again. The bolts groaned. The guards leaned into them, faces taut. Morgan crouched low, eyes locked on Noah's. Listen to me, Noah. You're safe. You're here. You're not inside anymore. His voice cracked, louder, shaking the corridor. He is. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then buzzed back. The guards shouted at each other, boots braced. The medic pressed a hand against Noah's chest, counting under his breath. Claire rocked the boy in her lap, her face pale, whispering frantic reassurances. Morgan's knuckles tightened on her weapon. She could feel every eye on her, the guards waiting for orders, the medic trembling, Claire clinging. And beneath it all, the whisper from her radio echoing in her skull. Almost there. Noah's whisper returned, faint but steady, threading between sobs. Choose. 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 The steel doors groaned, bolts bending under strain. The sound carried through the hall like ribs cracking. And Morgan knew, whatever pressed against those doors wasn't the storm. The steel doors bowed once, metal flexing in a way no storm should bend it. The guard shoved harder, boots skidding across wet tile. Sweat cut tracks through grime on their faces. Morgan held her sidearm steady, but her eyes stayed locked on Noah. The boy trembled in Claire's arms, whispering through cracked lips. Choose. 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 Each repetition grew more distorted, overlapping itself like an echo that didn't belong to one voice. The medic dropped his kit, hands raised. We can't hold this door forever. Morgan barked back without looking at him. Reinforce the bolts. Call command, lock this hall down. The radio at her shoulder clicked alive again. No call sign. No hiss. Just that same calm voice. It's already open. The lights snapped out. Darkness swallowed them whole, broken only by the sliver of rain-smeared moonlight through the door seam. In that instant, every sound magnified, boots scraping, ragged breaths, the slow creak of steel. Then, one more sound. Not outside. Not at the doors. Behind them. A footstep. Morgan spun, muzzle flare flashing light into the corridor for a blink. Nothing. Just walls, benches, the medic pressed flat. But she knew what she had heard. Claire clutched Noah tighter, rocking, whispering desperate reassurances. You're safe. You're safe. But her eyes darted wildly in the dark. The emergency lights kicked in, dim red strips along the ceiling, painting everyone in shadow. The hall looked different under the glow, longer, narrower, like a tunnel stretching farther than before. The steel doors slammed once more, then, silence. One of the guards muttered, "What the hell?" Another hissed, "It stopped." Morgan's gut twisted. Storms don't just stop pressing. They either break the line or they don't. She knew what silence meant in the field, the pause before the breach. Noah's voice rose above the hush, stronger than before, not a whisper anymore. He's not at the doors. He's here. The medic cursed, stumbling back. Claire's knuckles whitened where she held Noah's blanket, her face pale as paper. Morgan steadied her breathing, sidearm sweeping the hall. She raised her voice. Eyes up. Hold your positions. But the guards were already unraveling, their gazes darting to corners, to shadows. They were trained for men with rifles, not whispers in the dark. Then it came again. A footstep, this time clear, deliberate, from the far end of the corridor. The red light barely reached that far, but enough to show a figure. Tall. Still. Not dripping rain. Not shifting weight. Just standing, where a moment ago there had been nothing. Morgan's chest seized. She raised her weapon, voice sharp. Identify yourself. The figure didn't answer. Didn't move. Noah screamed, thrashing in Claire's arms. Don't let him touch me. His small hands clawed at her jacket, desperate. Claire nearly lost her grip, voice breaking. Morgan. The guards panicked. One fired, muzzle flash splitting the red haze. The shot echoed deafening in the narrow corridor. When the light cleared, the end of the hall was empty. Nothing stood there. The guards cursed, checking their rifles with shaking hands. Noah collapsed against Claire, sobbing now. It's too late. He's inside. Morgan's throat tightened. She knelt low, close to the boy, forcing her voice calm even as her own chest thundered. Listen to me, Noah. He can't hurt you while you're with us. You're safe. His eyes met hers. For the first time, his voice didn't sound like a child's. It sounded layered, heavier, two tones woven together. You don't decide that. You only choose who he takes first. The hall fell silent. Even the storm outside seemed to die. Morgan's hands shook, though she fought to steady them. Her gut screamed this wasn't a search and rescue anymore. It was something else. Something no protocol prepared her for. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears. What do we do? The boy looked between them all, guards, medic, Claire, Morgan. His lips trembled. Then, softly, he whispered again. Choose. The emergency lights flickered once more, stretching their shadows long across the walls, pulling them toward the boy like black hands. And Morgan knew, the barn wasn't where this began. It was just where they had opened the wrong door. The corridor pulsed with dim red, every flicker stretching their shadows against the walls until they looked like strangers. Boots squeaked faintly on damp tile, rifles quivered in guard hands, but no one fired again. The silence was heavier than the storm outside. Noah's whisper hung in the air. Choose. Morgan's throat was dry, her finger tight on the trigger. Her training screamed for clarity, targets, identifications, orders, but there was none. Just a boy whose voice wasn't only his, doors that open on their own, and shadows that stood where no one should. The medic's voice cracked. Lieutenant, what do we do? Morgan swallowed hard, eyes locked on Noah. His face was pale, fever-slick, but his stare cut through her like a blade. Don't let him touch me, he whispered again, trembling. Claire clutched him tighter, but even she flinched now, as if holding him was like holding a live wire. Her eyes darted to Morgan. What if he's right? What if it's him, not whatever's outside? The guards cursed under their breath, shifting stances. One spat, we can't just stand here waiting. Then, as if the hall itself breathed, the steel doors slammed once more behind them. Everyone jolted. The bolts rattled in their sockets. But this time, no one moved to reinforce them. Because at the far end of the hall, the shadow returned. It didn't walk in. It was just there, between one blink and the next. Tall, too still. Its edges seemed to bleed into the walls, a shape cut from the absence of light. One guard raised his rifle, voice shaking. Permission to fire. Hold, Morgan snapped. Her own voice surprised her, iron even as her hands trembled. Noah moaned, burying his face into the blanket. His voice was muffled but clear enough. If you shoot, he takes all of you. The guard froze, finger hovering over the trigger. Morgan's chest hammered. She wanted to demand how Noah knew. She wanted to ask who he was. But every instinct told her they were past questions. The radio hissed again. Calm. Confident. Familiar. One life for the rest. That's always the rule. The medic backed into the wall, shaking his head violently. No. No, we don't make deals with. The radio cut him off, sharper this time. Choose. The word echoed in the hall, vibrating the steel, sinking into the bones of everyone standing there. Claire looked at Morgan, eyes wet. Don't make me, her voice broke. She held Noah tighter, shielding him even as fear hollowed her. Noah lifted his head, his small voice cutting through the hum. He's already inside me. If you leave me, you leave him. The words hit like a strike to the chest. Morgan staggered back a step. Was it a child's plea for help? Or a warning that keeping him was the greater danger? The shadow at the end of the hall didn't move. Didn't breathe. But she felt its patience. Waiting. Knowing. She thought of the barn. The hidden door. The way Noah had whispered through the wood before they ever saw his face. She thought of the truck locks rattling, the whisper over the radio. None of it made sense unless Noah was right. It wasn't following, it was already inside. The medic muttered frantically, "We need to sedate him. Now. Restrain him until command decides." "No," Claire hissed, her arms tightening around Noah. "He's just a boy." Morgan's chest burned. She raised her weapon, not at the shadow, not at the door. At Noah. The hall erupted. Claire screamed, shoving back against the wall, curling around the boy. The guards swore, rifles snapping toward Morgan in confusion. Her voice cut through them all. "Stand down." Her eyes locked on Noah's. "Tell me the truth. Is he in you?" For the first time, Noah smiled. Small. Sad. "You already know." The red lights flickered again, and for a heartbeat his eyes weren't a child's, they gleamed darker, older, staring straight through her. The shadow at the far end leaned forward slightly, like a bow of acknowledgement. The radio hissed. "Choose." Morgan's weapon shook in her grip. She had led men into fire, pulled strangers from collapsing buildings, dragged survivors out from floods. She had always believed every life was worth saving. But this wasn't the field. This wasn't the flood. This was a door that once open could never be shut. Her breath rasped in her chest. The muzzle steadied. And for the first time in her career, she realized there was no rescue here. Only a choice. The corridor pulsed red, shadows stretched long across the walls, every face frozen in the moment. Morgan's sidearm was steady now, both hands wrapped firm around the grip. The boy in Claire's arms stared at her, eyes too calm for his age. The guards shifted uneasily, rifles caught between two targets, shadow at the end of the hall, soldier at the center aiming at a child. The medic pressed flat to the wall, whispering a prayer under his breath. The radio hissed again, calm, certain. One life for the rest. That's the rule. Noah blinked slowly, his voice threading the silence. He's right. If you save me, he takes more. If you end me, he leaves. Claire sobbed, clutching him tighter, her voice raw. He's just a child. Morgan, please. Morgan's finger trembled on the trigger. Her breath shook as memory after memory pressed into her mind, pulling a flood victim out by the wrist, lifting a wounded soldier over rubble, covering a child in an earthquake with her own body. She had always chosen life. Always. But now, life for one could mean death for many. Her eyes flicked to the shadow at the end of the hall. It hadn't moved, but its patience filled the air. It was waiting for her hand, not its own. Morgan's chest heaved. She lowered her weapon slightly, enough to breathe. "Noah," she whispered, voice breaking. "Is it really you talking to me right now?" The boy tilted his head, lips twitching. "Sometimes a child. Sometimes something older." He answered, softly. "You already know." The hall went silent again. Even the storm outside seemed to stop. Morgan's throat burned. She looked at Claire, at the guards, at the medic, all waiting for her decision. Her voice cracked. "I can't kill a child." The radio hissed sharp, louder now, like breath against her ear. "Then you've chosen." The lights died. Darkness swallowed them whole. Noah screamed, not words, just a piercing cry that cut the silence like glass. Claire clung to him, guards shouting, rifles swinging. The steel doors at the far end blew inward with a shriek, wind and rain exploding into the hall. Morgan dove forward, tackling Claire and the boy to the floor as a wall of cold air surged past them. The shadow stretched, filling the corridor, swallowing the red glow of emergency lights. Then, silence again. When Morgan opened her eyes, the hall was dim but still. The floodlights outside burned steady through the open steel doors. The storm sounded ordinary now, rain and thunder, no more. The shadow was gone. Noah lay limp in Claire's arms, chest rising and falling slow, steady. His face was pale, but his eyes were closed like sleep. The guards lowered their rifles, breaths ragged, faces hollow. The medic crawled forward, trembling hands checking the boy's pulse. He looked up after a moment, voice shaking. "He's alive." Claire broke into sobs, clutching the child tighter. Relief and terror tangled in her tears. Morgan staggered to her feet, sidearm still in her grip. Her hand shook now, every muscle screaming from the choice she had made, or hadn't. She stared at the steel doors hanging open, rain misting through them. The radio crackled one last time. Soft. Gentle. Almost kind. "I'm inside." Morgan's hand dropped. The sidearm clattered to the tile. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Then it never mattered what I chose." Her voice broke. The boy stirred faintly in Claire's arms, murmuring in his sleep. Just one word, fragile as breath. "Soon." And the hall fell silent.